Okay, right, okay, I'll hit the button and we'll go. We should be live. With a bit of luck, that should bring us to live. Good evening, this is Molten Chat, celebrating what has been the NAMM 2021 show. This evening I have, adventurer, perhaps, swashbuckler, Benn Jordan with me, who's a YouTuber, producer, musician, all sorts of things. Ben, say hi so they can tell us that they can hear us in the chat.
Hello. Can you hear me in the chat? Well, no. Can you hear me from the chat? Am I loud enough?
Can someone who is in the chat tell us that one can be heard through the YouTubes? Maybe that's what we're trying to say. I don't know. It's not articulated brilliantly.
Am I speaking to, when I speak to people in the chat, I'm speaking to the future, aren't I? Speaking like 20 seconds into the future.
Yes, you are.
What's it like over there?
Yes, but we're always responding to the past. I mean, it becomes a full cycle. All good, yes, says Sensian. Thank you for that, mate. That's appreciated. Well, we'll kick off then. So here we are. Ben, we don't know each other, which is exciting. So, so I'm keen to find out a bit more about you, as well as to talk about some gear and some opinions. Somebody said Ben is loud. I don't know, were you a bit shouty earlier? Give us another test.
Hello. I wonder. I'm looking at my views, but they seem to be like almost to the red. I might be popping every now and then.
I'm just gonna shave off 4 dB. There we go, because we're all sound engineers or something, apparently.
We're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Well, the YouTube really interface is just so good for this.
We're here to find out a bit more about you and your thoughts on some NAMM gear and stuff like that, and just see where the conversation takes us. You're very welcome to ask questions in the chat, everybody out there. As you know, if those of you who know me, I selectively ignore all sorts of things and sometimes just go off on it all by myself. But don't worry, throw things in and we'll see whether we can pick them out, and they might be interesting and may take us off into different directions. But anyway, in the meantime, Ben, so tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you describe yourself and what you do?
I would say, well, I'm obviously a musician. That's like first and foremost.
Is that because of the way you dress, or is it a haircut thing?
Yeah, the eyebrow. I think it's the eyebrow. No,
of course,
I started music when I was a little kid. I was very into jazz. When I was younger, growing up, that's kind of where my foundation was. And when I was a teenager, I started getting into electronic stuff. And I don't know if it's. I think it's a little interesting that a lot of the other YouTubers that I've met in doing streams like this and stuff, people, even like the more high profile ones, it's like they have this YouTube career that's blown up and now they want to go be musicians. Like now they want to go on tour and they want to release albums, and I kind of have it backwards. Like I have this like long touring and all these albums, and now I'm kind of starting this YouTube career in the last 3 years. And so, and my goal with the YouTube career is to be completely transparent about it. I don't really hide this that much. I don't want to stick around in pro audio forever. I want to move on to science, and I want to move on to like broader things. Because pro audio is cool, and I think it's a great place to jump off into science from. Especially, it's funny because the videos that usually perform the worst on my channel are the ones where I'm trying to do that, where I'll be like, okay, acoustic levitation, whereas yelling about Behringer will get hundreds of thousands of views, but making things levitate with audio gets 5,000 or something. So, but that's my goal with this. That's what I'm doing here, and it has led to some research jobs and stuff like that. Like I actually, in some fields, I could even call myself a scientist, I suppose, because I've been hired as one. So
that's very interesting. I mean, what? God, that's weird. I had this thing in my head that it then decided not to come out of my mouth, and it's gone somewhere else. So I'm now floundering. So I had something really, really poignant and interesting to say. God, that's going to drive me nuts now. Anyway, I'll pick that up later, I'm sure. But what I was going to say was, God, that's mystifying. Doesn't matter. Smoothly, I will move on to thinking of something else. No, well, I mean, what impressed me, I think, about your YouTube channel and the sort of videos that you've done is exactly that scientific approach that you take. Because I mean, lots of us are spouting opinions, lots of us are doing demos of stuff, but you approach it in a very critical and scientific is perhaps the word, scientific way, in order to dig down into what it is that's going on with something. So yeah, sure, you'll do a video on an Arturia synth and say this is great, this is a demo, but then you'll also do something on the reasons why Spotify exists or not, or whether an iPad is good or not. And you won't, it's not just an opinion, it's not just, oh look, here's an app and that's fun. You'll actually put these things together and how that workflow works and whether it does or doesn't, and its value or not value. So it's that level of detail that you go to that I find really engaging with the sort of stuff that you do, and I don't find that in too many places.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that you notice that, because I usually write, like, it's not a word for word script, but I usually will write out, especially if it's something that has to do with something like Spotify or something where I want to be really factual with everything that I'm saying.
Yes.
And so I don't want to make the mistake of saying something that comes from my heart that actually is violating the truth of what I'm talking about. And I always remind myself, I even write on pages sometimes, because, obviously I'll just speak freely to camera, and I'll even write down in front of me a lot of times a note to essentially remind myself to make sure that I am being objective, not subjective. That I'm reminding the viewers as much as possible that this isn't my opinion, that I'm trying to say it as, that I'm trying to basically relay data in a way that's more relatable, or I guess repeat data in a way that's more relatable to my viewers. And it was rocky at first, but I feel like there's older videos where I did one on like vinyl, on like how toxic vinyl is.
I know, you ruined me.
Yeah, and that one, it's like I can see. I watch that video now and I go, okay, I wish I didn't do this. I wish I didn't say it this way. A lot of people got really scared and messaged me about like needing to get the vinyl out of their house. Like they took it a little bit too seriously, and it's like, okay, I could have like played this a little differently to make it more accurate to how much of a risk it is, because I think a lot of people took it a little bit too seriously. I expected people to, give me the finger and be mad, because, that's like what you get when you say that somebody's lifelong collection is toxic. But so I don't know. And I've been working on one now that's like the ultimate. I won't go into too many details, but yeah, it's like the next big project I've been doing in that regard is kind of the ultimate, trying to keep my opinion out of things as much as possible. But yeah, anyway, I appreciate that.
Is that possible though? I mean, is one able to truly present information objectively? Is that actually possible? Is that human in fact?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not. It's not possible to be completely objective. But that's why we, many ages ago, they invented the devil's advocate, or, came up with the devil's advocate, is that it makes, if you have an opinion, your opinion, the reason the devil's advocate exists is to challenge your own opinion, so it's stronger in an argument. And so that I really like the devil's advocate. I always play devil's advocate, even in Spotify, it was like, all right, well, we have to like actually admit that it did a lot of good for the music industry if we're going to talk about the damages. Or the Behringer one is even a bigger example. Like you can't really highlight all of the bad things about Behringer, all of the things that they've done that are controversial, without noting that, hey, this has put synths in a lot of people's hands that couldn't have afforded them otherwise. Yes. And that's a good thing, and erasing that would be bad. So yeah,
it is. I mean, I remember Napster, for instance, as in the first time around when it actually happened, and that revolutionized my music listening. I had fallen completely away from listening to music, I think, or buying any kind of music at that sort of time, and except for live music, I think was the only thing that I really consumed at that time. And suddenly I had this access to an extraordinary range of music, and that developed, and ultimately Spotify as a child of Napster somewhere along the line, that kind of streaming, that kind of access to music, it just seems extraordinary. I mean, out the other end now, it feels perhaps we're left in this situation where we have too much choice and we don't quite know what to do with that, and that has its own problems, I think. But as you say, it also, you have to weigh these things. You have to see the value that it brings as well as the difficulties it brings with it, because you're not going to find a perfect system or a perfect product. It's just a matter of balancing those pros and cons, I suppose.
I didn't think about it at the time. When the Napster thing happened, I was probably like 19 or something, 20. And I didn't think about it much at the time. I was a musician. I didn't think about how insane of a change that was, that moment of Napster, like when that caught on and people were able to just download content. Everything that we consume now, all information, changed at that moment, whether it be Netflix, whether it be getting a court document, whether it be anything. Like everything just immediately changed direction of how it's accessed, and that obviously changed the way that things are funded all around. And I think most importantly though, I'm doing what you did where I like lost my thought for a second. Most importantly though, it for music at least, it really made anybody who buys my music, like any fan of mine who buys my music, is doing so as like a gift. They're not doing so because it's not like if I made a toothbrush and they needed a toothbrush, so they'd buy a toothbrush out of necessity. Like all of a sudden it turned the music industry into almost a charity. Like you bought your favorite artists' albums because you wanted to support them, because you know that you could get it for free elsewhere. And Spotify and YouTube kind of changed that. Like Spotify was smart enough to know that a lot of people will use Spotify because it's less of a pain in the ass than downloading an MP3 and loading it to your device, right? So yeah, it's interesting because now all of a sudden it's warming in a way. Like I would not have a career if it wasn't for piracy, like from the get-go, because like my music was just too weird to be ever promoted largely on a record label. And yeah, it's a little warming. It's nice to know that the vast majority of the people who listen to my music or any musician's music these days, or support them, are doing so as an option, not as a necessity. That's really nice. Like that.
It is. I mean, it feels quite heartwarming. I mean, when you mention charity, though, that kind of like grates, because it's like, yeah, because I mean, it's lovely that someone chooses to purchase my music, but it shouldn't be a choice. It should be payment of entry, mate. You don't get to listen to this without paying your dues. Otherwise, how does it work? Otherwise, it just becomes as you say, it becomes a charity. It becomes a nice community activity, but no one can base a business plan or pay their bills or start a family on that kind of promise.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like there is often like a black or white, like copyright needs to be paid for, like intellectual property needs to be paid for and it needs to be purchased. Otherwise, the people who make it can't make it anymore. And that makes sense, right? And then on the other end, it's like, well, intellectual property coming at a price is charging for information, whether it be for cultural information like music or films, or whether it be something as, as a scientific paper, as like a white paper. Like that's a great area to talk about this. Like white papers, if I decided to write a paper, let's say I had a college and university fund a study, and I wrote a study, it would get published to one of the many scientific paper publishers, and then they would charge money for it, for access to it, and I wouldn't get any of that money.
Right.
Like typically I would get nothing. And it's just this like middleman that, and then me coming from somebody who doesn't get funded, when I do want to research something for a video for educational purposes, then I have to buy it, or I have to just not have that data. And it's like, well, this is kind of disruptive to technology, isn't it? Like, this is kind of disruptive to like the flow of information and how human beings keep moving up to the next step. But on the other hand, as somebody who has made a living through intellectual property my entire life, I of course understand the challenge of not being paid for music. And it's hard to get my mind out of that. It's hard to get out of the mindset of thinking that if somebody downloads an MP3 of my album or downloads my album illegally, that they're stealing from me. But it's kind of important that I do, or it's important that I think everybody does, because otherwise we're stuck in that like 2006 mindset where like we're just suing people for listening to music, right? Who can't afford
but then, as the adverts say, you wouldn't steal a DVD, would you? You wouldn't go in a shop and shoplift. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's not quite the same. What sort of? Is it? Right. I don't know. I watched the telly through my mate's window the other day. Am I stealing? I don't. Maybe.
Yeah.
It's difficult out there.
Well, in the UK, I mean, you guys have the TV tax, or I know that like a lot of people. I understand. We don't need to get into that, but the concept of it is nice. Yeah. I actually don't mind the concept of socialized copyright. I think that probably would have been far better than Spotify, Netflix, that rather than having tech startups control information and, select how it works. And, Spotify, of course, turned into a media company now rather than just a tech company that delivers. Now they're actually, buying podcasts and buying exclusive material, which is like, it's not the original business plan. And that's not necessarily the one that I want to be involved with. I want to be involved with the one where they just allow people to consume what I'm creating, but they're their own company. So
yeah, I mean, the TV license thing is kind of is almost like the original subscription service. I mean, it's always boggled my mind that they haven't actually grasped what BBC iPlayer is, that it is Netflix and has been for many years, and why they can't monetize that in a normal way. But it's brilliantly British, because you go to iPlayer and it says, "Oh, do you have a TV license?" You go, "Yeah." "Oh, okay then." Off you go. Right. And that's all that's required. And it's like, cool, blimey, they could be making money off this if they, actually put some kind of front end on it. But there we are. We do it in our own way, and we take old people to prison who forget to pay their TV license, and and that's just the way of things.
Yeah, I've definitely, I've read a lot about it. I remember the vans that supposedly could detect. Yes. I remember that whole thing, like the ominous vans that were gonna put everybody in prison, or get everybody a big fine. It's interesting because we have PBS and we have NPR. We have things that are, public broadcast service. Yes. Although I think that they're like so defunded now, and it's definitely different. It's not like you don't just pay a tax. You don't pay like a TV tax for PBS. It just comes out of the government's funding. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting because I was a big fan of public broadcast, both radio and television, until Trump, and then all of a sudden, he was pressuring. He was basically, there's a lot of like from his administration, there's a lot of pressure on them. Just basically, he hated the media in general, and so it made me think like how easy it would be for the government to say, "Look, you're not going to get funding unless you go along with what the state tells you to say." So that kind of made me think like, this could be, I see how this could be problematic. Well, we get a lot of that because we have in the BBC, for instance, it's a very old school way of thinking, methodology, hierarchy, those kinds of things. So know that at the top, the people in control are very much of a certain conservative nature, perhaps, and they're all in the same sphere of influence. Yeah. But at the same time, you have a lot of the people who are actually creating the content, certainly on the comedy side of things, that is very left wing. So it has this strange mix where you can argue the toss about it's right wing bent over here and it's left wing bent over on this side, and
it somehow manages to be all of those things just as equally good and bad in both directions, which again is very British, I think.
It seems like they understand the futility of not having it that way. Like they understand the futility of their own network if they, just, if your primetime television show is just like a picture of the Queen for 30 minutes or something, you're like, well, no, but I mean, the BBC obviously produces amazing content that the entire world consumes and appreciates. It's interesting too. I mean, we're going so far off topic here, but
Yes.
Back when Hugo Chavez was in control of Venezuela, he had a morning show every morning where I'm not going to say anything politically about Venezuela whatsoever. I'm just saying in general, he had like a morning show where he would just be like, "Hello, nation. So today I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to talk to this guy, and then we're going to deal with the United States because they're trying to rip us off with oil." And that's what I thought that was kind of nice, like a nice little like pleasant address every morning of like what your government's going to do for you that day. That's, I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, the chat's getting a bit antsy now. There's a lot of BBC bollocks kind of stuff going on, which is odd and weird. And I think it's raining. If people can hear a general background sound, that's probably rain hitting the top of my shed. But
I was about to say that I like it. It's a very nice. It's thing. It's
we have very natural sounds here, which is nice. Somebody said about Ask Delia about BBC hierarchy. Do you mean Delia Smith, as in the cook, the person who owns Norwich City Football Club? Is that who we're talking about? What's Delia and the BBC got to do with all this? Has she got herself in trouble again? This is probably aside and probably not the right Delia. But anyway, that was interesting. But let's wrangle this back into some kind of music technology arena, perhaps. So NAMM then. Hey, we just NAMM went past, which is the most important trade show of the year. I know for people who saw this last night, I did talk to Bo about this, of course, but I'm interested in Ben's view on these bits and pieces as well. So if we go over some familiar thing, well, that's kind of what it said on the ticket when you came in. So don't worry about it too much. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So NAMM, then tell us about your. Do you have any NAMM stories? First of all, why open a beer?
I don't. So this year, anything that happened in NAMM this year, you're basically, for anybody who's watching this, you're watching a reaction video from me essentially, because I somehow have just had my head buried. I've had some products sent over. I don't think they're NAMM products, but I've just been like buried with those lately, and I don't know. I've just somehow I've missed the NAMM news. So this is going to be this is where I'm going to be getting it live. So it'll be reaction video. NAMM stories. Yeah, I've never had a good time. I don't think I've ever really enjoyed NAMM ever.
Really? How often have you been?
Back in the day, I'd go as a musician. Like Native Instruments brought me out one year. RME brought me out one year. Or was it RME? I don't know. Basically some company that had some sort of product that I was using as a musician would say, "Hey, do you want to, do a demo?" Or a lot of times there's an after party. There used to be, the big shows and stuff like that. And so I would usually get booked for one of those and then just have a NAMM pass and say, "Oh, I'm going to go and have the time of my life. It's like the biggest guitar center ever." And then, I'd end up like spending half a day by the tech stuff, and then most of the time actually with like the Latin American instruments on another level, because for some reason those always just seemed like it's just more fun to like watch those people play. And last year I went the first time as a journalist, which, it was a nightmare. It was terrible.
It's better to work it. It's always better to be there for work, because you have a place to go, a place to put your bag, a place to be, a reason to be there, and you don't have to decide to enjoy it. You can go, I'm working, so it's all right that it's a bit crap and I've tripped over 3 times and I can't find any food and I just really want to sit outside smoking. That's what I'd rather be doing this minute.
So they like, did you go last year? Were you there?
No, I haven't been since 2005. I think it's been a little while since I've been, but I went for like a span of 7 or 8 years while I was. I was working in a music shop, so I was part of the purchasing team.
it's grown immensely. I mean, it's like I can't even just from that era to like the last year I went. Yeah, I had like media parking. There were spots where I could leave my things, stuff like that, promised to me.
Yes.
None of that actually existed when I got there. The line just to get in was like half a day, probably. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was just, it was insane. And so I remember telling them, hey, I want to do some interviews with product developers. Like instead of just like when they asked me to come, I was like, all right, I'll come under this condition. I want to be able to, if I see a product that I like or a company that I'm familiar with, instead of just having it be the loudest, most obnoxious product demo ever, can I get like a booth or something where I can have a conversation like this, where it's quiet and where we could actually, discuss things? And so they're like, all right, well, we're gonna think about this, blah blah. And so by the time that I actually got there, the booth was out in the open. It was next to like a stage that was like performing music the entire time, so you couldn't actually have really a conversation. And yeah, and I remember I just used it as like a hangout area because you couldn't even record things unless you used microphones that they supplied, which were like in beta from some microphone company that sponsored it. They basically turned it into like a money making thing. And I think they had like some peanuts back there one of the days. That was the only positive. But yeah, I mean, the only positive experience I really had at that convention was like hanging out with Andrew Huang and Lupop in that area. I was just like in the little roped off loud area I have. Tim Exile as well was there. I got to meet up with him and catch up. But other than that, yeah, it was just a nightmare. And the last day I didn't even go. I just went to the beach instead. So.
Yeah, not a bad choice. I think not a bad choice. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, it had become a necessity, I suppose. It's one of those things that we would be having meetings with the UK rep for products in Anaheim that we could we could have just got on a bus and seen back in London. But no, we have to have our meetings out at Anaheim, which was always very weird. But my job was I was scouting around trying to find interesting new products to import into the UK. So I was always looking for the weirdos and the strange stuff and trying to get a conversation with somebody, which was also really hard work.
They're a non-profit, by the way, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean they do. I mean they do a phenomenal amount of great work with education and with access and all sorts of things in that stuff. But the other side of it is this crazy trade business environment that's, I guess, trying to keep all these little music shops alive. Ultimately. So but we didn't have that this year. We had the virtual version, and we've had several virtual versions of things this past year that have been good and they've been bad. They've been different, certainly. I mean, as you say, you didn't experience much of the event or the experience itself. I mean, did you go to Synth Booth? Did you experience any of Synth Booth? It was in November, I think it was October, November time.
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
That's also not going to help then. But the general vibe was that
Oh yeah, sorry. So just so you know, usually I have in my email, I generally get like all the press releases happening. So I'm generally aware of the things. I just don't necessarily. Probably the reason I didn't look at NAMM coverage is probably because I've already seen so much of the stuff in just the email, in the PR company emails that they send out to us YouTubers. So no, fair enough.
But the idea was that they had this huge schedule of seminars and talks and product launches and all sorts of bits and pieces. I mean, on the surface it looked very impressive that they pulled all this stuff together, but as you went through the schedule, which had multiple things on it every hour, there didn't seem to be anything I actually wanted to see. I mean, I'm sure there were people for whom it was fantastic, and they wanted to know about mindfulness in point of shale materials, or in diversity in underground cable management. These kinds of hot topics that were obviously part and important for some industry somewhere, but it was very difficult to find actual new product. And when you did, it was just a pre-recorded video that you could have watched anywhere, anytime. So
Right.
if they were attempting to capture some kind of community idea, I'm not sure that they did that. But I haven't found anyone who really did any of it yet. And so maybe I'm wrong and I just wasn't in the right sort of part of the world when it happened or something. I don't know. But I don't know. It doesn't bode well for future virtual events, I think.
Yeah, or maybe that's just like the bottom, and we'll build up from there. We'll figure it
Maybe.
out. But
I mean,
I don't
Synth
know.
Booth
These
was
events
similar.
don't really need to exist, do they? Like they don't. But when you think about it, like last year when I was at NAMM, like most of the products, any of the exciting products were already like teased and announced before the actual event happened. And
True.
by the time I got there, I was like, well, why did I come here? You know, I already had some of them, like sent to me as demos or something. So I was just sort of like, but what's your, so yeah, like what is your favorite NAMM announcement? The Korg seems to be the most exciting, huh? I'm looking at them now. So.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, Korg usually leak all over the place like the week before NAMM, and they managed to hold it together this time, which was quite good. But yeah, essentially it was Korg's show. Really, they had a few things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I've got a picture I can throw up here. Let's just get myself into the right place. So we had this fella here, which was the Modwave. So it's another Korg synth in the same sort of form factor that we had the Op6 and the Wave State, and this time it's wavetables. And now we can spend a lot of time talking about how wave sequencing and wavetables is different, because nobody really knows. In fact, I had a meeting with Korg this morning and they weren't really able to tell me other than, oh, well, it's different, isn't it? And it's stuff. It's like, yeah, great. So it sounds a bit different. So that's the idea. So there you go. There's something new.
Yeah, and it. Yeah, okay, so what I'm reading also is that it has like some chaos pad elements.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a gravity-infused ping-pong type XY modulation interest, which is interesting. Got a couple of oscillators with 2 wavetables you can morph between to find those unknown territories in between a couple of different places, and then a shed load of modulation.
What do they have a price on that? Did they release the MSRP?
I'm gonna have to click on it again now. Hang on.
I'm looking at one up here too, and I don't see anything that indicates a.
It's too miniaturized on my display here. I'm gonna have to see it somewhere else. I think I'm gonna go for like 649, but I won't tell you which money's that in yet. That could be Hong Kong baht. That's 799. I've got it at Toman, so that's euros. So the UK, that'll be an added £500 customs fee, and then you've then got to pay the porter £100, I think it is, and then there's tax on top of that. So it'll be a couple of grand to the UK, but 799 for everybody else, I imagine. Which is not a small amount. That's a good chunky synth sort of price, I think.
Yeah, I had wondered how many companies were kind of trying, I guess, capitalize on the success of the Hydrasynth. Like, because the Hydrasynth hasn't had the best distribution. Like they had kind of a rocky start. Not to their fault. I mean, they launched their product literally at the worst possible time historically. But I was wondering like how many companies are now going to be like, which is exciting to not have every company releasing an analog clone, and instead being like, where could we go with digital synthesis? Because this Hydrasynth went to some interesting places, and Walrus has a new reverb pedal, so I know I'm going to be asked to. Sorry, I'm just looking at that. The moment I see reverb, I'm like, oh, reverb. Okay, that's my.
Well, there was one thing that I thought might interest you, which is the this fella here, because you did a video on the Poly Bobby reflop flop. I can't remember what it's called. Bebo, there we go.
Bebo,
yeah. So they're doing a Eurorack version of that, which sounds quite sounds quite exciting. I wasn't in love with the interface particularly. It seemed a little bit Reactor-like, perhaps. a little just stringy stuff together, as opposed to something that used use the big screen in an exciting way. But from what I can gather, it has a lot of functionality, has a bit of a Zoya feel to it, perhaps. Bit 1010 Music as well, with their sort of digital things. We could be even stretching ourselves to the other thing I can't remember the name of, which is the percussor. There we go. Percussor. Multifunctional thing. We can even take it as far as a disting. Is it a bit like a disting? So what are your thoughts on bringing this to Eurorack?
It's a odd. So that it's weird because I obviously did a video on it. I have the pedal. I like the pedal. I don't have the module. I'm not. I had a little bit of criticism about the pedal, and I wonder if that maybe annoyed the. I don't want to get into names. I wonder if it annoyed the person who primarily is developing the pedal. I didn't say anything bad about it. I think that it's a nice pedal if that's what you want. I almost wish that was just like a tabletop interface though. Yes. Like I feel like on a modular, the Zoya modular version, which is, it was at last year's NAMM, and they've announced that it's going to happen. And I have one sitting in my rack, so let's just admit that it exists. The Zoya is like a workflow that you get used to that doesn't involve screens so much. It just has that little screen that just essentially gives you a number. And then everything else is like pressing 2 or 3 buttons at once, and then like moving the knob to you can get used to the Zoya in a couple days. And I think that could fit very well into a Eurorack workflow, especially if you have a small Eurorack, especially if you don't have a massive one and you need something that's extremely versatile. And that's what it is. It's extremely versatile. This is too, but the two things is I feel like that screen, I just wonder how much noise it's going to create in my Eurorack. Like a screen that big, I notice that anything that has, when I look at my modules, I notice that the two that have the biggest screens are the noisiest, and I have them on a different power setup as a result. And it's exciting, but I just wonder how often I would use it in a modular environment, how often I would want to be menu diving and stringing virtual things together on a little touch screen when, I have a bunch of analog cables that I'm stringing together next to it.
Well, that is it. That's always been my question really with the 1010 Music stuff. Even as far as other complex digital modules, in that's not really what I'm here for. Other people may be, but I precisely stumbled into Eurorack because of the expanse of knobs, and to one degree or another, the one knob per function idea. The idea that I could follow movement down this flipping cable, and I could plug that in somewhere else, and then that starts doing a thing, and then I can control that. Once that becomes a multiple levels of stuff within itself. People laugh about my struggles with the disting. It just drives me nuts. It's phenomenally useful, but I hate it with a vengeance. I hate you. I know you're doing something nice, but I hate you. If I've got to change it now, I'm going to just lose my shit. But in
my last video, I went through the entire modular rack, and the disting, I've never used it in a patch, literally, because I just saw that scrolling little Las Vegas bank sign or whatever. I don't know. It reminds me of one of those, outside of a casino or outside of a bank. Totally. I just saw that, and I was just I'll just use the LFO over here instead. And then I'll go to it again and be I'll just use this reverb instead. And as a result, I've never used it, but a lot of people like it a lot. I think at that point, I just asked myself, why am I at my modular right now? Why am I not at the computer next to my modular? Or why am I not at the, Montage 8 that's on the other side of my modular? Why am I, why am I here?
In its defense, I guess it has provided some things that I have. So, it's I'm exploring a particular concept, and so I need this thing, and I don't have this thing, and I open up the manual and I search through that, and I find an algorithm that has that thing, and then I spend 15 minutes trying to remember how do I get it into the mode where I change algorithms. again, and I'm poking at it, and the thing's going past, and I'm poking at it. But then when I do find the thing, and then assuming I don't get annoyed that I've just now pulled out the cables again by accident because they don't stay in the flipping holes. There's a lot. There's a lot in there to drive you crazy, but it then does do the thing that I wanted it to do, and so for that, I am grateful for its existence. And then I buy something that does that thing, so that I don't ever have to do that again.
I think I would use it a lot more if I had like a one. Yeah, if I only had one level of mod, if I didn't have a whole desk, I think that if I had a much smaller module, I would obviously use it a lot more. And I'm sure that you could get used to it. I'm sure that the user interface eventually can be mastered. I just didn't have the patience for it, I think. And,
no, I'm similar. I mean, I'm interested in the larger one, the Super X, AX something.
I didn't even know that existed until I made my video and people pointed it out. So
So I mean, that's a great direction to take it. That makes sense. I think that's Oz listening to everyone's feedback, because he has a massive fan base, which is great. But there's also, because he has stumbled into a wider market, I suppose, because you see it everywhere. That there's a large group of people now going, well, I just want something that's easier to use, and so he's answered that, which is awesome. So fair play.
Excellent.
I also enjoy the fact he produced a general MIDI module so that you could have org hits as part of your modular. I think that's a groundbreaking moment.
Yeah, I have like the ES8 and the ES6, and sadly I just don't use them. They don't fit into my workflow, but they work and they're fine. But they're modules that I actually need to like give away or sell, because like I know that they're still valuable to some people, but for some reason, I don't know. I run everything through like an ADAT interface on its way out, and then I'm just not sold on like I'm okay with running like the Polyan Perk, or sorry, the Poly 2, like that has MPE support, so you have a far wider range than what you would normally get with like the 128 signals that you could have in a MIDI signal over CD. So it's like I don't really see the need to have an audio to digital conversion rate like the ES6 provides. Like the Poly 2 works fine. I would never notice the difference, but it's just a workflow thing. But they're
I mean,
nice.
I remember now the reason that what I was using the Disting for, and that was to provide ES1 and ES2 functionality, because I did this whole not a series, I did an article for Sound on Sound, and I did a couple of videos on AC and DC coupling, which bent my brain in half, but one of the missing pieces was this little tiny circuit which just has got a capacitor attached to it, which Expert Sleepers used to produce. Essentially, you can do it with a cable. Just attach a capacitor to a cable, and you smooth out the whichever way around it is, the AC coupling coming that you've amplitude modulated. It's amplitude modulating sign comes through, and you smooth it out with a capacitor. And that's the thing that I was looking for. I was trying to build it, and then realised that actually he's made a fake version of that within the Disting. So you just plug your AC signal into Disting, and it smooths it out. It's like, oh, fantastic! There it is. So it definitely has had its uses in places. How did we get onto this? Oh yeah, the pedal thing, multifunctionality within Eurorack, and whether that's a good thing or not. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that those modules just fall out of my workflow quickly. I don't want to say I don't want to like say too much, but the Empress, the Zoya module, I don't even know if the name has been released yet, but the Zoya module, that's a little different, because as long as I'm in one page, I can just press buttons and patch things almost, just by looking at some lights. And it's sort of halfway between, I think that's the brilliance of the Zoya, is that it's sort of, the user interface is sort of halfway between what you would expect from an analog interface and what you would, and something that is, has a farther reach, something like a digital interface or something like Reactor. You're essentially getting Reactor, but just with a light bright. So
Well, let's have a look at another thing. This is
Sure.
the drum log, or as Bo called it, the drum log. I don't know where that came from, but he speaks weird. So this is a drum machine from Korg. This is the official photo, and I got told today that this is a leak. That's no, I'm not supposed to have that. So I'm told. So this gives us a little bit more information about it, which is that there appears to be 4 rows of knobs. That's the word I'm looking for, which is analog. So you've got a group of 4 analog channels there, and then a sampler channel. But there seems to be 2 sample channels within it, but the one set of knobs for it or something. I'm not quite sure about that. But of course, because it is a log, a drum log, it also has the multi-engine digital oscillator that you can change with extra third-party oscillators from people like Tim Shoebridge or Sine Vibes and that kind of thing, which could bring a whole other thing to it.
Yeah. One thing that I've been saying recently to myself, since I'm in a pandemic, is that I really would like to have more FM drum capability.
Okay.
Like I was just saying to myself, like, man, I really want an FM drum machine, like other than the capability of like I know the analog the can't even remember the names of these things.
Are we talking Electron?
Yeah.
Digi1, Digitone?
Yeah, analog rhythm. The analog rhythm has, I think it has some FM, but it's just not that powerful. And yeah, so hopefully it has that. That'd be nice. I've been interested in like new drum things. There's just not enough like new drum machines. There's just the 808 clones and the 909 clones and stuff. And I'm kind of like, come on, we need another Tempest.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing with the Queen of Pentacles from Endorphins, which is an odd creature. It's still in my need to give this time to breathe kind of area yet. So I still need to spend a lot more time with it. But half analog and half sample based, so it gives you this potential of putting in whatever the heck you like. But an interesting module in itself, but it has a little bit of a menu system that I can't quite get to intuitively yet, so I'm going to have to sit down and learn it, and that always annoys me. But there we go. Some things are worth learning. I do understand that, and but yeah, interesting drum sounds, because I mean, in Eurorack particularly, you get big modules which just do one ping, do a kick or do a and there is an obsession with those analog percussive sounds within Eurorack that I don't quite understand, but I appreciate perhaps from afar.
Do you remember the DR660, the Boss, like DR660 series? Like, I just miss that interface. Like, I miss that sort of, like, you could really dive deep on your drum sounds if you want to, but you don't have to. And then sequencing it, there's both a step sequencer and a real-time sequencer, and it's just, I don't know. I just feel like I was able to customize things so well with that sequencer. Same with the JX305, which I did like a video on that as well. Like the step sequencing in it, how deep you could go, or how it could just be as simple as playing something to a metronome and it quantizing like a MPC does. But yeah, maybe the Korg has something like that. And does it say if it has a sequencer in it, or is that not released yet?
Yeah, no, it is a sequencer drum machine. So it has all of that kind of thing. It even mentioned the word groove box, but I don't think that's an accurate description. I didn't get the sense that there was any melodic side to it, although these third-party oscillators, of course, could bring that in some way and make that usable. It's still a fair way off, as the other thing I understand. So it's not not imminent in any shape, but yeah, interesting. I think
I'll tell you something that I'm actually excited about. It's something that I actually have. It's upstairs now, but the Antelope Audio Zen Go. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I'm vaguely aware of it, because it's out of my. It's not out of my field, but because I write about synths, I tend to end up fairly focused on it. But I'm familiar with the Antelope, which is a very sort of beautiful looking desktop. The Zen, rather beautiful looking desktop audio interface. So is that of that ilk?
It's a small, affordable version of the Antelope Zen, and you can load effects into it that are either made from Antelope or third parties. But the whole thing about Antelope, the reason most of Antelope stuff is so expensive is because of their clock. Like they have a really, really perfectly designed clock. And I feel like most people don't really know why they need a good clock until they find out why they need a good clock.
Is that an RME kind of vibe as well? Is that where that comes from? Because RME has always been about the quality of their clocks within their gear, and again,
yeah, RME definitely has good clocks. It's funny, like a great like rudimentary example would be like on the computer I'm talking to now. I just have like a small Presonus audio interface, and if I were to take like a Blackmagic Design camera with an SSD connected to it and record myself speaking for an hour, and then the recording of the audio was going into the Presonus, there would be major drift within how that audio recorded. It would be possibly up to maybe 3 seconds of drift, which drift is way different. If I want to sync that in Resolve or something like that in an audio video editing application, drift can't be done with just a right click. Like you have to spend a long time solving it. There isn't like software that really solves it that easily. So that's like the most rudimentary place where you could see the difference between clock quality is drift. But it also, we're looking at pictures of it. It's really nice. It's built really well. I've tried it out. And yeah, as far as the AD goes, I've really been happy with the recording that I've done with it. I've recorded the Polybrute into it, and I was really pleased with how it sounds.
Nice.
Haven't tried it with the iPad yet, but if it works with the iPad Pro, then it'll be like the most exciting audio interface.
It looks like it has a lightning connector on the back.
Yeah,
it's
Apple dropped their class compliance program with USB-C, so everything is a gamble. So yeah. I'd say that my only criticism thus far is that it doesn't have DIN MIDI. But yeah, I feel like, for somebody on the go, I don't think that's really really always that useful. So, but yeah, it's basically the first time you're going to be able to get that kind of quality for under $1,000.
Well, that's awesome.
Have they announced the price? Let's see if I can. Yeah, $500.
That's all right for that sort of audio interface. It puts it with sort of audio fuse level, perhaps, or babyface, that kind of thing. Which is it's in the right sort of company. I mean, I wrote a review yesterday for this fella here. Look at that. See that?
Oh wow!
See that? Can you guess the price?
$99.
$39.
$39,
and actually it's all right.
Wow.
It's $39, so it has certain limitations that are implied in the price, perhaps. But it's got the same features as a Focusrite Solo or a Presonus entry level solo thing, all of those sorts of things. But it's $39.
Wow, that's like one of those things like when the Chromecast first came out, and you're like, how is it so cheap?
Yeah,
it's like one of those.
I mean, it's very light, and in fact, when you put cables in it, it just go. So cables hanging out the front. Sure. But for someone who wants to get into music production and has enough to spend on an Xbox game, they could instead buy an entire studio. So it comes with Pro Tools first and a bunch of plugins and stuff. So
that's great.
You're off. So, but there's scales to these things. We understand that in our industry that there are various levels to these things, and that's okay. We have to accommodate and understand that. Which brings me to another product, I suppose, which is have I lost where I was on my Magic web page over here? Come on, come with me. see, behind the scenes, you have no idea of the level of technology that's going on to make all of this happen quite so seamlessly. You would think that would be easy.
Not for me.
There we go. Managed to click on it. Got it over here. This fella. Now, we weren't expecting that.
No.
So this is Korg.
Really? Yeah, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Is this like a teaser?
No, this is a real thing. It's called a Mini Korg 700. They've labelled it FS, which makes us go, "Ooh, is there going to be a mini one?" But for the moment, this is one of Korg's first mono synths that they ever produced. It was designed, which I think is brilliantly designed, to sit on top of an organ. So if you had an organ or a Rhodes piano, and because all organ players in the 70s wanted to play lead synth as well as their organ chords, and so it was designed to sit on top, so it would be slightly high, and so difficult to reach the controls at the back, so they put the controls on the front. And for that, it sort of turns itself into this wonderfully 70s hi-fi looking piece of musical art somehow.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, I'm blown away. That's and so it's just a mono synth.
Yeah, 2 oscillators.
Yeah.
In fact, the original had 1 oscillator apparently.
I like the aesthetic.
It is. It's a lovely thing. A lovely thing. These sold out apparently the day after they mentioned it. So
I was about to mention. I was about to say who's going to buy it.
Yeah, well, it's all gone already. It's already gone. It's $2,000.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a piece of, as I say, it's a piece of music art, I suppose, music instrument art that has now been snapped up by people who like those, who collect synthesizers.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's like one of those things where if they were like, "Do you want to do a review of this?" I'd be like, "I don't know what to say about it."
No,
like,
I don't know either. I just know that it would be a lovely thing to have. I don't know where I'd put it exactly, but
I want to like photograph it on my kitchen table with like a foggy day outside with a steaming cup of coffee next to it or something.
That's
like
exactly it.
Right.
I then have to buy an organ.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm blown away by that. That's crazy. Yeah, Korg is making moves, huh?
Yeah. And the other one we should probably talk about, which will spin us into directions, I think, which is, of course, this one, which was expected, which is I don't like to call it mini. I don't know that it's mini, but it's slightly smaller, ARP 2600.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got a picture of it.
I think I played with it last year at NAMM.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, it was already. They already had like the prototype. Yeah, I know that it's going to be expensive, or that I know that it's already on sale, isn't it? Or am I thinking?
Not quite. No, I mean I think it's 1,500 was the figure. Okay. I think in my head, which is sizable, but better than its big sibling. So and potentially reachable. And not quite so aspirational. I know with the first one came out, we all were a bit drooly about it. But then, of course, realise again that it's going to be those synth collectors who are going to snap those up. And so they did. Yeah. So they've all gone, I think, already. But this is going to be a bit more widely available. And it should have been out already. But they've created this case for it, which is a brilliant idea. Rather than do it in a suitcase like the big one or a big flight case, they've put it into a hard shell kind of airport case on a trolley, if you know what I mean. So it looks like your hand luggage. Yeah. So it's just about hand luggage size. So they're supplying each one with this purpose-built piece of hand luggage, but that has delayed them by 6 months because of delivery and manufacturing problems on the case. So it should have been out sort of by Christmas, but it's now more likely going to be the summer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the 2600 is one of those few synths that you could really, especially in this format, like a just analog modular, where that's all you need. Like I've had a lot of fun just playing with those for hours. And it's like one of those synths you could really lose time in.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about people who own the originals and such like, and even ones that are broken, it's still held as
Yeah.
in very, very high regard, even if it's not working properly.
Apparently the original ones had a pretty big problem with breaking. Apparently they weren't the most reliable synthesizer, but I remember there's a classic video clip of Stevie Wonder playing with one, and just hitting it, and he was like, and he said work, and he said work thing. He was just like preaching to it, trying to get to work. But yeah, no, I've played with them in synth shops and at friends' house and stuff like that. I don't own one, unfortunately, but that they definitely are like a coffee table synth that you could really enjoy for long periods of time without needing more, without ever being like, oh, I need an effects processor now, or oh, I need some sort of other device, which is rare to find.
Yes, that's true. And so that then brings us neatly to this fella here, or this pair of fellas, rather. I mean, Behringer didn't even have to do their own event this year because there wasn't really an event to do an alternative event to.
Yeah.
So there was no Bannerheim. They just released a few things because they felt they should, because they need limelight. They have this desire to always be talked about, and so we have, of course, these recreations, emulations of the prequels, I suppose, to the 2600 that we mostly know, the ones that didn't work quite so well. So they thought, we're going to do those. So we have the Blue Marvin and the Grey Meanie, if I've got that round the right way.
Wow.
That's about
it.
That's
I wonder if it's just one of their prototypes or if they're actually going to make it.
It's planned to arrive in a couple of months. In fact, they were saying it would turn up before the next batch of the orange one do.
Okay.
But also it's a limited edition, so we're not entirely sure what that means in Behringer numbers, because they sell a lot of stuff. But I mean, my immediate reaction to it is just that it does look nice. I prefer that to the twinkly Christmas lights of the 2600 that they did. Not that there's anything wrong with twinkly lights. I have lots of twinkly lights, but I like the uniformity of the color. I think it's a little bit more classy, because that's something that I feel Korg has done well. They've managed to leverage the kind of the vintage class of the 2600 more than Behringer has. And part of that is the kind of the garishness of the lights that they've stuck in all the faders. I don't know whether they achieve anything. Do they? I guess they must glow with LFOs and things, mustn't they? One would have thought. I don't actually know that.
Yeah, I would imagine. I would hope.
You'd like to think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I wonder how many of these are making, and if they're. I mean, obviously, I have my own odd relationship with Behringer. I'm still wondering if. I'm not even sure if the swing is real, to be honest. I'm not sure if that's actually coming out or not, or if that, because they really do. It's almost like they use our
drama?
Community. Well, not drama, obviously, but I feel like they use our community as almost just as they constantly bounce opinions off people.
Yes.
Like they're always like, what do you think if we release this? And then, and people get really excited. Then a year and a half later, the product will be, on Amazon.
With lots of comments underneath saying, where's my RD9, you bugger? And things like
that. Right. Yeah. And so, and part of me did wonder if the whole Behringer swing thing was trying to see, who's going to take whose side in something that deliberate. But I realize that going into this territory on somebody else's channel is maybe not the.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm also known for my rants on these things. I mean, it is interesting. There's no way you can't be fascinated by their approach and what they're doing, and to try to see it objectively, as you spoke about before, is interesting, because I mean, it mirrors all sorts of things. It mirrors our political situation. It mirrors things like Brexit and the attitudes that people have these days towards, whether it's towards music, whether it's towards a pandemic, whether it's towards technology. We have this polarization, which is quite extraordinary, to the point where you can't have a conversation with somebody who holds, or it appears, you can't have a conversation with someone who holds the other view, because you cannot step into their shoes. I cannot for the life of me work out why Behringer would release the swing. I can't find a good reason. It just seems to be just to piss people off. And I can't, it's like, there must be a reason, because there must be a bunch of designers going, no, we're going to make it exactly the same. And someone must be going, well, we could just move this over here and give it no, we're going to make it exactly the same. Yeah, but why are we doing that? Oh, because we're buggers. That's why. I don't know. I can't quite bring it out of there.
I have a pretty good guess. I have a guess. I haven't, maybe even an educated guess. I don't know if I would go as far to say educated guess, but my guess is that they're doing it to see if Arturia will sue them. And if Arturia sues them, and if they win, then they can use, whether it be in the Philippines or in China, if Arturia sues them and they win, then they can use that case as essentially the compass of how they can proceed on violating other people's intellectual property. Like they could just point to that case, and then other companies will be intimidated to do it. Because they did the same thing with Blue very recently. They announced a microphone that did it. They did it with I don't have them here. The Bear Dynamic headphones.
Yes.
They did it with that. But it's just that the key step is just so popular that that's the first one that people noticed, on a huge level. But they've done it with a lot of products that just aren't as popular, like a specific type of headphones or something.
But there's a level of it that will tolerate anyway. I mean, it's like Gear for Music, for instance, do their own branded bits and pieces of everything. There's Sub-Zero mixers. I've got a Sub-Zero mixer. It looks a bit like a Yamaha mixer, or is it a Mackie one? Can't quite remember. And we tolerate that because we understand that entry-level stuff is good, and it's only just a little shop's version of something. It's not as if we're blind to the fact that this happens all the time. It just seemed to be it's somehow different when it's a big company in our industry taking stuff away from a smaller company in our industry. It just seems rude.
and Arturia is not a small, I think Arturia is, this is actually the thing I'm working on now. The video I'm working on now is with the Polybrute, and I feel like the Polybrute is officially Arturia graduating to the Roland Korg level. Yeah. I feel like now they're officially a grown up and are one of the big synth companies, because everything they've made is just like hit it out of the park recently, and they're very ambitious. And I mean that the Polybrute is like incredibly ambitious. So I don't necessarily see it as much as a Davy and Goliath situation with Behringer and Arturia, because I do think that Behringer also benefits. Music Tribe benefits from inflating how big they are, and inflating how what their overall value and influence on the industry is, and they benefit from that a lot. And so I don't really see it that way, but I do. It's very easy to see it that way. It's very easy to then see Behringer say, okay, well, this Empress product works really great, so let's make an Empress clone of something, and we'll just point back to that Arturia case that we won, or that they dropped or whatever. So
it is terribly cynical, though, isn't it? I mean, it's not a nice train of thought. One likes to, because the synthesizer, in particular synthesizers, I think the community around it is so strong. Whether it's Superbooth, whether it's online forums, there's a passion, and there's a sense that these are boxes and instruments that anyone can use, anyone can make music with, and it opens us up creatively. And that sense, I think, is I don't know if it's unique, but it's certainly something very powerful in the synthesizer community. And so we like to believe the best in one another and the best intentions and the motives, because we know the bloke who's designed the Eurorack module that you're now using, and he put it together himself, and you know that if that capacitor blows, that he'll run out and he'll fix it for you, you know, just like that, because he's your mate, you know. And we have a lot of that sense of camaraderie within it, and so when someone comes in here and just pushes it all around, you know, like coming in like a bit of a schoolyard bully and just pushes people over and gives you a wedgie, everyone feels it, I think. And what frustrates me, I feel, is that we've been very polarized by that, and there's people who are okay with it and people who are not okay with it. There's plenty of us in the middle, plenty of us are trying to be objective and trying to find a third way, perhaps, but it has created this dissonance to some degree, which I don't think we need. We don't need it, really. I don't think it's been helpful.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating. Brand loyalty is very fascinating to me. It's something that's always, there's healthy brand loyalty where every single thing that a company's released you've liked, and you just enjoy it, and you've never had a bad experience, so you just feel safer buying something from the company. A lot of people do that with cars. I do that with Kia. Like, you know, the last 3 cars I've owned have been Kias. I've never had a major mechanical problem, so the next car I buy, I will go to a Kia dealership first. Then there's unhealthy brand loyalty, which is where, you know, a friend of mine says that they're going to buy a new PlayStation and rather than Xbox, and I've already, you know, let's say that I purchased the new Xbox and I've spent, you know, kind of a lot of money on this Xbox. It becomes loss aversion. Like, it becomes a threat to me when somebody buys something else and chooses differently, and we don't really realize it. And it just comes down to loss aversion, which is really, really crazy. I did a poll on my Twitter recently where I asked if we're in a casino and if you put $100 on a roulette on, let's say, the number 36, put $100 on 36 and it landed on 28, how mad from 1 to 10 would you be? And most people said not really mad, you know, it's expected, whatever. And I said, okay, so now if you got a call on your phone or something, or you looked away and they did a game without you, and then it landed on 36 on the next one, but you didn't bet, how mad would you be? And most people said very mad. I'd be really mad. And the interesting thing about that is it's kind of an obvious answer. Like, yeah, you'd be really upset because you didn't bet, but you're more upset for not losing $100 than you are for losing $100. Like, and that's like the weird psychology of loss aversion, right? And that comes into play big time when we spend $2,000 on synthesizers and somebody else spends $2,000 on a different synthesizer. We get really defensive because we just hate losing. We hate the idea of possibly, you know, having put money into something that's not worth it.
Yes.
And that's everything we own generally, isn't it? It's like, it's hard. You know, these are all hobbies. These aren't necessities. We're not using our synth. So it's kind of,
we not only want to make the right choices, but we also want to be seen to be making the right choices. That's become very prevalent in our online world, in our virtual world, in our Instagrammed synthesizer experience. You know, you want to project that you're making the right choices, let alone making them in the first place.
Yeah, and arguing is a lot different than it used to be. Debating is a lot different than it used to be, I think, because we're not psychologically prepared. Like, I mean, you're probably like me, you're old enough to remember when you'd have a debate about something and sit for an hour and like weigh all the pros and cons of each option, but, you know, between A and B. You know, like a really, like the classic one that we're having is, do masks work? You know, there's a lot of people who believe that masks don't work. And so you would be like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 plies. Maybe you might even spray some water into one. You might do that. But now that we have the internet, you immediately get like a white paper shoved in your face if you're wrong. You just, you know, even if you're wrong about something that's obvious, you immediately get an article that says you're wrong. And then somebody will manage to scrounge up an article that says that, in fact, you're not wrong and that person's wrong. And you just, I don't think we're psychologically prepared to have our egos destroyed every single time we make a mistake. You know, it's interesting. It's like, and so I think we just grip on and we just dig the holes deeper and dig our heels in.
That's
And I
right.
think
Because
that's,
there's this wonderful thing that we've lost, which is that ability to change our mind, to come to a realization that actually, no, you're right. This is not quite right, and I need to be going down this road. I
yeah.
think that's it's becoming a lost art form. I mean, I have a religious background, so I have a very I used to have, I think, a very finely tuned ability to debate, and you're right. That's been lost. I mean, Facebook, YouTube comments, whatever, very, very quickly gets me rattled, very, very quickly gets me defensive, and that's unhealthy. And I don't I don't like it, but I have learnt over the years to to back that down, and I know which gears to move into. I know what triggers me, I guess, but
yeah, I notice it. I mean, obviously I see it a lot in politics. I see it a lot in, even if I don't want to spend too much time paying attention to right-wing politics here in America, because it's, I feel like it's not very the healthiest thing to do. But even on left-wing politics, that's what really fascinates me, how visceral people are with each other on 2% out of the 100% that they disagree on. Like, we could agree on 98% of something, and that 2% difference will have them at each other's throats. And that's always just, that's just it's so bizarre, because I feel like that probably hasn't been a thing since before the internet. I don't think that we had that. And like I said, I do remember having debates before the internet was around, and before you could immediately flip a light switch to prove somebody wrong. And I felt like I learned more from every debate I had. I felt like it made me wiser in the past, and now it doesn't as much.
No, you don't feel you grow through these things.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to how we started this whole stream. Is I think that it's important to always try and have some sort of look back and be like, am I being objective? Am I playing devil's advocate with myself? Because that's the only way I'm going to learn more. And that's usually when I make a video, I'm not an expert. That's like just delivering my knowledge. I'm learning as I write the content of the video, and that's awesome too. That's a special gift for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely a fan of learning as you go. And also, I mean, when we talk about presenting on YouTube, I mean, my vibe is very much, I'm going to discover something and I'm going to kind of show you what that is as I discover it. Even when if I'm trying to sound authoritative, I don't usually get away with it too good. If I could prove what I'm doing right in front of you, in the video, then that I feel good about that. I feel I've achieved something within that video. So that's where my sense of truth comes from, I suppose, is to make it demonstratable right in front of you. It's not that I know it, is that I'm discovering how LFOs work right in front of you, and hopefully trying to communicate that across. That's
there was a YouTuber, his name was Raj, and he was a popular YouTuber about everything related to neural networks and deep learning. And he basically gave you tutorials like how to create a neural network in 5 minutes, with Python and things like that. And I was a subscriber to his channel. I learned a lot from him. I really enjoyed his content. Every time he had a new video, I'd watch it, and I'd try a lot of the code examples out and stuff like that to teach myself this. And he had some sort of program, some sort of program where you could pay $1,000 for a course from him or something. And in that, apparently there were some factual mistakes and some things he didn't get right. And it turned out that he didn't really know nearly as much as people thought that he knew. And he was just relaying information that he read from other places. And it kind of destroyed his channel. People don't watch him anymore. And it was funny because I thought to myself, well, everything I know about deep learning is from him. And if he didn't know what he's talking about, this stuff still works for me. And, I used it to figure out how to buy a house in the right spot. And so I can't hate him. That's what teaching is, right? Is just relaying information and building it in different ways. Yeah, but people are just oh, he's a fraud. And it's not really, he's a good teacher. That's what he is.
Yeah. No, I mean, ask any teacher whether they know their subject, and the answers will vary. I suggest my wife's a teacher. I just put that straight up there. But they teach. It doesn't really matter what the subject matter is. I mean, obviously you have some kind of advantage if you have background knowledge in it. But my wife's a primary school teacher. They teach everything. You know, she doesn't have a master's in mathematics. She doesn't need to. But she can teach the method and the curriculum in front of her. You know.
And there's a bit of like a Wizard of Oz type thing in there, isn't there? Like you kind of have to come off confident, even if you might not be that confident. Which brings me that I'm not looking at your chat, but I'm sure I wonder how people side on this. If you went to, like, this is just a question that I ask people sometimes because it's interesting to me. If you went to a Jacob Collier show, and he played 150 different.
You mean
instruments.
fantastic keyboard harmony wizard guy in a poncho? That guy.
Yeah, that
okay,
guy.
Gotcha.
The young guy, it's funny because I hated him for a bit. I just didn't like him.
Exactly what you mean.
You're right, and I was like, why don't I like him? Because he's like who I wanted to be when I was his age, and then I realized that's the problem. I'm jealous.
Yes.
Like, you know, so like every time I saw him like play an instrument better than I can or understand harmony better than I do, I just wanted to like put him in a, you know, rubbish bin. And so, but now I respect him a lot, and I think he's an amazing musician. So if you went to see one of his shows, if he played his like 150 different instruments and blew your mind in all these different ways, and then 6 months later you found out that it was all 100% lip synced, that it was you know, somehow you just found out that he was just acting to a recording, and it was this pre-recorded, rehearsed thing that seemed real. How upset would you be? Like, would you want your money back? Like, because you were still entertained, and that's what you paid for when you went to see the show. And I thought about this a lot when I would tour, because obviously, as an electronic musician, a certain portion of your music has to be pre-recorded. And luckily, due to DJ culture, me just bringing a guitar and playing certain parts of my song was like a lot more than what everybody else at the festival was playing, because they were just DJing or, you know, playing their tracks in Ableton or something. But I, as a jazz musician, always felt like I was cheating in some way, you know. But at the end of the day, the way I would always resolve that is like, it's entertainment. Like, they paid for the ticket and they got what they wanted, and it's a service. It's not art. It's like me providing a service to an audience. So I don't know. I wonder. I
think we turn cartwheels in the sense of some forms of imposter syndrome or authenticity that we're trying to look for, certainly in performance. I think. I mean, again, as I'm a relatively new electronic performer. I mean, I've played guitar in bands and sing songwriters, that kind of thing, busked. But to do it electronically, I have always viewed the DJ with a certain amount of skepticism. You know, as a performance, I very much appreciated it as playing nice records I could dance to at the disco, but not in terms of live performance. It was not something that I really fully understood. But now, as an electronic musician who's performing with modular, that seems ridiculous, because the energy and passion that I put into that performance is no different to how I would in playing guitar. It's just more complicated to me and less obvious to the crowd. And those are the things that we're trying to get over, I think, in how do I capture a crowd with what I'm doing in an electronic sense, like I would have done had I been playing a naturally wooden stringed piece of instrument. You know, those are the things that
I've struggled with this a lot. The shows I want to play, like I went on a tour that was improvised MIDI guitar, and every song that I played I was writing in real time, and it was never be heard again, and it would never be played again. And that was like, it was difficult, it was challenging, it was fun. I actually got nervous before the shows. I enjoyed it, and that was probably the lowest paying tour and the lowest turnout I've ever had, because people just want to hear the songs that they have on the albums, right? And I've always sort of tried to reconcile with this weird fact where if I, you know, when I was booked at a big festival or something, I would just think to myself, like looking out at the audience and their engagement of me just, you know, playing these bangers that are recognizable that I've released, just thought to myself, like, wouldn't I be way more useful if I were a jukebox that people could just like text the song to and then hear exactly what they wanted to hear and then do what they would, you know, dance and do drugs or whatever else they were doing in the audience. And And before the pandemic, I was slowly talking with like my booking agency. I was like, I really just want to move to seated gigs. Like, even if I make less, I would rather just, have a piano gig or have a guitar gig or have a gig that, maybe had a few of those things, but it was like more improvised and more personal. And even if there's only 50 people in the audience, that's more meaningful than, playing the same thing over and over again to however many.
Maybe, but then meaningful from your point of view, or your
Right.
perspective, not necessarily meaningful from the audience member, because there are these two dynamics going on. I think there's, I mean, in a romantic sense, I like I like the idea that there's some kind of contract going on between performer and audience that elevates that live experience, even if you are just playing tapes, or triggering samples, putting on a record, that somehow elevates that above any other form of listening experience, some kind of connection, because that person is actually really there. I guess that's the next level when you hologram yourself in. Does that make it different? If it's performed in Second Life, is that more or less valid? So lots of interesting things of that. I mean, but that also flows into, there was a comment in the chat about people listening to music don't care if it's a Behringer 2600 or an authentic ARP 2600. Yeah, which is true, but that assumes that there's only one person involved in that experience. That from the listener's point of view, that may be true, but from the person who created it, that's something that they may well agonize over as part of their understanding their own process and their art and the instruments and the things they use and the choices that they make. It's just, there's levels and levels of complexity, I think, to that relationship that we have to our instruments, to our music, and then the other side of that is that then goes out to the listener. It is fascinating.
The biggest elephant in the room, I think, for at least any electronic recording artist is that we just always ignore that the vast majority of people listening to our music are listening to it through laptop speakers or phone speakers or Bluetooth speakers, or, the best you could hope for is like the Apple Pods, and you spend all this time mastering and engineering and, getting the Antelope audio interface and, getting the analog synthesizer and all these things in it. And it's utterly meaningless to the actual listener. But like you said, you had a very good point where it's like, it's meaningful to the creator, but it does play that elephant in the room, doesn't it? Because I suppose like I could sell a lot if I aimed it to just that it's being.
But how do we get?
To.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I had a question after yesterday's live stream about how do we deal with gas? How do we deal with the desire to acquire more gear, the next shiny, sparkly thing, when actually that often detracts us away from actually making any music? Or wouldn't we be better off working with the tools that we have? That old chestnut. And it is, it's certainly a very valid question.
I mean, it's years ago. I don't want to name names. Like, I feel like it's years ago. I went to the studio of a very popular musician who had, probably over $1 million worth of synthesizers and things like that. And he didn't know how to use any of them. And he actually had hired somebody to basically make certain sounds and show him how to use certain things. I could even go further. This isn't the same person I was just talking about, but Herbie Hancock, for example, hires, like, Native Instruments would send out people to his place in LA and teach him how to use things and show him how to do things. I've spoken to Herbie Hancock about using things like iPads and stuff like that for live performances, which I was thrilled by. He's my hero. But it's interesting because the more you acquire, the less you understand about what you already have, and therefore your creative output goes down. And I'm suffering from having my YouTube channel. Suffering is like the most like, oh, it's so
most
bad,
entitled
guys.
thing.
I can't even get through my porch and so many boxes every day. No, there's but I feel with that a bit too, where it's like I feel like my creative output has gone down. Back in the day when I had like, two pieces of gear that cost less than $500 each, I was working on music, so I was making 2 tracks a day. And now, it's 2 weeks to finish the snare sound. It's kind of, but so now I'm just trying to like get less. And now all of my gas has gone to gear acquisition syndrome, for anybody who doesn't know what that means. Now all of my gas has like gone to like cycling. Like I have to keep talking myself out of buying a mountain bike part or something like that. So,
yeah. Well, my Instagram feed is now packed full of motorcycles because I had a motorcycle since I was about 19, I think, all the way through to about 5 years ago when I finally had to let the one go and we had no cash to replace it. And so I've been pining for motorcycles. So that's my thing. But that's ridiculous. I mean, that's silly money, even compared to synthesizers. You know, motorcycles are silly money.
Oh, yeah.
But so that's what would keep me interested. But I mean, my experience on that ride, I suppose, is that Eurorack has made me far more creative than I've ever been in my musical life. Perhaps harking back to my 4-tracking guitar and borrowed a Roland D50 off someone that did everything else. That was some drum programming on that, I can tell you. But going from computer to Eurorack was immensely freeing. You know, I mean, of course, I've stumbled down the rabbit hole and it's grown ridiculously. And there's tons of modules I'm not using anywhere near as much as I could or would or should. But compared to the infinite arsenal I had on my computer, Eurorack enables me to contain it enough to keep being creative. You know, I think that's there's a physicality that is helpful in hardware.
Yeah. So when you're using like if you have an idea and you're writing something on Eurorack, or I guess making something in Eurorack, however you define it, do you usually then record it to the computer and then use plugins over it, or do you just kind of, is Eurorack the end for you?
Yeah, though that tends to be the end. I did start off trying to multi-track, but then I found myself back. I'm standing in front of this flipping door again, and I'm going to be here forever. So I've stopped doing that, and I just record stereo out directly into Resolve usually. So I've got stereo output just going straight into there. So I'm filming it, so it ultimately becomes a video as opposed to, well, it can become both, but I'm aiming to release a video at the same time. So I do those two things together, and it's a performance, and it's done, and I then pull the whole thing apart and do something else. You know, it feels very edgy. It feels very on the edge of things. Feels very transient, but also exciting because it's I have this bubbling, a build up, something good comes together, then it's worth recording that and then moving on. So there's no polish, there's no sense of I'm going to make this sound spectacular in post. I mean, I might stick it through Ozone or something and then, well, my experience of Ozone is I turn it on and go, no, and then turn it off again, and then go, ooh, and then turn it on again, go, no, and then turn it off again, go, oh, but it's lost so much. What if I just turn it up? All right, there, perfect. So
right.
That tends to be my mastering experience. So
for me, the modular is like the idea desk. It's like where so many ideas come out of it, and then if I play. A lot of times I think in my last stream, I sort of talked about this where I have like an hour, maybe 2 hours where I'll play with the Eurorack and then usually make some sort of generative melody or something. And I just have to then get a guitar, or I just have to go over to the piano, or I just have to then be playing live music along with it. But it's really easy to then direct. Yeah, I think that's just the way that I typically do it. Is it's you know, if you change the bass note behind a chord, you could change the entire structure of the song harmonically. And so I feel like even if it's just playing a cheesy solo over it or something like that, I have to do that. But typically then I record in multi-track, and the idea starts there and then it goes somewhere else on the computer or, some other environment. But it's huge for that. I mean, it's amazing how many ideas started with Eurorack. When from the moment, I think I probably got my first modules in like 2015. I was a little late. So, and I got them for a film score, and it was like, I was just like, I'm going to do this film score 100% modular. And I put the entire budget on that and then just grew it from there. But Yeah,
Nice.
it's amazing how it's an idea sparking desk for sure. But that's awesome that you're doing it all. I hear more and more people that are just doing their entire session just from the modular, and that's kind of inspiring.
But at the same time, I mean, this is very much a learning experience for me because I haven't yet entirely worked out how to change key or even change a chord. I mean,
Yeah.
I can move a bass note around, but then the amount of
Mhm.
thought that has to go into, the amount of patching that has to go into to actually do kind of verse chorus structure and then a change is
Yeah.
difficult. I mean, funny enough, this Saturday, I think it is, I'm speaking to Traversy tomorrow, and she's part of the Southern California Synth Society. And they've got
Mhm.
a big sort of party on Saturday, and I'm doing a performance in that. Or I have done the performance. They have that, and we'll be playing it. And my aim for that, it was 15 minutes, which didn't seem like much. I can waste 15 minutes, no bother at any time. But 50 minutes that I then prepared to listen back to was a whole different matter. And I found
Yeah.
that incredibly intimidating because I thought I need to have a change. I can create a loop. I can do 16 notes and loop it forever. I could even do 32 at a push, but 12 if I'm feeling funky. I'm going to do a 12 note loop. Oh yes. But can I do something which loops and then changes and then maybe even comes back again? I mean, that was quite extraordinary. So the idea of just using the modular is still quite aspirational from my point of view, but it's something that I'm really enjoying pushing towards. And the thing that I worked out, I think, in what I learned from doing the recording for this, is that making a pad from random oscillators in a Eurorack is really hard. And there must be something in regular keyboards that just make it easy, because it's really hard to make 3 oscillators sound nice. How do you do that? But I got 2
Yeah.
to sound nice. I ended up with 2. That seemed to be enough. Otherwise, it just overwhelmed. But no, it was a fascinating thing.
Do you, hey, I've made some really nice pads with the quad VCO dope for module.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like that's one of my favorite modules. I mean, whether you want to create like one mono sound out of the main out, or if you want to create like pads with different, but that thing with like the quad envelope generator and then an ornaments and crime or something, you could really just like go to space fast, like and
Yes.
melodically. Like you could just really go nuts, and it's pretty amazing. But
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting. The reason why what I said about that film score that I did, um, it wasn't modular where I like my first idea wasn't to do it with a modular. My first idea was that like all of the rhythm and harmonies have to be based in Boolean logic, like logic gates, right? And so modular was like the natural place to go then. It was like, okay, well, then let's go with modular. But it's very interesting because that's basically what we're all doing when we're writing songs on a modular is we're just writing them in Boolean algebra. And that's crazy. And, most of us don't understand the fundamentals of Boolean algebra. So it's like very weird to like convert our thoughts that way without knowing it. But yeah, if for your viewers whoever have trouble with that, an exercise that has helped me out a lot is just little like logic gate games. They have
Mm-hmm.
some for like Android. They're like little puzzles and puzzle games and stuff like that. And it's like once you get it, you could just like race through them. It's not even complicated anymore. You're just like, oh yeah, okay, got it. But then you can bring that over to a modular, and all of a sudden, it becomes a little bit easier to make pattern chains and things like that using
Yeah, I
logic
mean
gate modules.
that's a step I'm working towards. I have. Is that it? No, I don't know. Could be, might be. Yes, because I've been doing a series. Or I have a series of DIY. I've been quite getting into my DIY Eurorack, which has been a revelation, I have to say, unexpected.
Yeah.
And Thonk sent me a couple of Frequency Central. You see those?
Okay.
Frequency Central logic things, because I don't really have any logic in my Eurorack. It's never occurred to me as a thing that I was supposed to do. And so they've sent me a couple of those to build, which I plan to do, I think, next week. I'm trying to schedule it in. Scheduling is difficult. And then, of course, once I've built a couple of logic modules, I'm then going to have to work out how the heck you use them. So that's going to be my learning experience for the next couple of weeks, is working out what they're for, how useful they are. I mean, I did electronics O level, which was 40 years ago. So I understand NAND gates and OR gates and AND gates. I understand the concept. I've just never really used them in any kind of musical sense. I'm aware of their existence. I see them a lot in things, but it's going to be interesting to discover what they can offer.
When you consider it's always blows my mind to like make a Logic Gate melody or make a lot, or Logic Gate rhythm or pattern switching thing or something like that. And then, be like, wow, that was really complicated. Like I could barely even keep all that in my brain at once, and then turn around and realize that like everything like this video chat is all running on that same formula. But that's how much more complicated it is. Like to think like even unlocking your phone is like, how many ones and zeros and NAND gates and everything is just happening at such like I guess at a nano level, right? At a
yes,
like now we're down to nanotechnology level, but that's absolutely mind blowing.
But that's what Eurorack is so good at. It's so good at flipping that over and making everything big, or making everything one process, making everything simple. Following this signal down that cable, as I say. I love that. I love the fact that I almost experience the wobble of an LFO. It's not just a function within a big keyboard or a function in software, which I'm just clicking on randomly. It has a purpose to the point that I can feel this cable is doing this, and I know that's going to do that to the thing that I plug that into. I love that. That's really opened me up somehow in ways I hadn't expected.
And it's kind of funny, the other side of that, I would say, like, because these kind of conversations always make me wonder, like, oh, I wonder when we're going to have our first like quantum computing module, and like, oh, that's going to be terrible for Qubit's brand name, isn't it? But anyway, when I think about the other end of modular, like who's doing the most complicated and sophisticated synthesis, and like I feel like that's always Yamaha's territory. I feel like with the Montage, for example, they've like the reason I don't do more videos with them is because I have worked with the company, like I've been in development, but and it's a little bit of a conflict of interest. But yeah, for example, on the Montage 8, the synth engines are so complicated that nobody can really sort out what's, you have so many FM operators and algorithms and stuff like that, that it just becomes unusable from like a user experience perspective, which is Yamaha's thing. A lot of times as a Japanese company, they just kind of don't get the like Western user interface preferences as much as, some other companies do. But so their way of dealing with that, and this is just, God, I hope I'm not saying anything that hasn't been released yet. I think that this is now public on the Montage. Their way of dealing with that is deep learning and like using a neural network to find presets that you like in a square, and then figuring out where in that square you like it, and then pressing learn, and then it learns what you liked, and then you do it again, and it hones in your preset automatically using deep learning, rather than you ever having to understand how all of these FM operators are working together with a sample engine or additive synthesis, etc. So but that's like amazing.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I guess it's in some ways the Workstation vibe is about curating sounds. It's about providing a platform from which you can just create music without having to be that sound designer, without having to be the programmer, without having to do all the things that you would employ a studio engineer for, and there's, for an awful lot of people, that's extremely empowering and helpful. Not everyone needs to be a synth nerd. Not everybody wants to get under the skin of the synthesis, and find it there.
I play it. I play the Montage a lot, and like one thing you forget about is that they're very stage oriented. Like those workstations are still very like performance stage oriented stuff. And so it's funny because I'll be mine's actually upstairs. So it's like in a recreational room upstairs, rather than in my studio. And I play it a lot. And yeah, and it's funny because I have like a piano right here, but it's just so fun to like play piano parts over like jazz trio that I'm triggering with the other hand and stuff like that. And it's Yeah, but they're still very useful. It's
Mm,
just interesting to me how they've kind of taken the, I don't know, they're not really in the spotlight right now, workstations, especially ones that are that powerful. Like I wonder when they're going to get like the popular resurgence again. Not that modular doesn't deserve it, but
yeah. But maybe that's just
there's all,
perception. You know, it's like when because Casio were at NAMM undoubtedly releasing yet another automatically
yeah,
infused keyboard of delights that's going to sell by the absolute bucket load, but not to me, not to people like us necessarily, not in the world that I'm aware of. But it's still a massive, a massive market
yeah,
for other things.
yeah. I think things like the montage answered, like there was a big question years ago where people were like, is there any piece of hardware that can do something that my computer can't, like in term, not speaking like analog digital, but in general,
Yeah.
like can make a sound that my computer can't make. And like the montage was kind of like hold my beer, that was sort
Yes.
of the like, here, yeah, try and do this. Yeah, and it's interesting because it wasn't received that well. Uh, like people didn't really pay attention to it. They're just kind of like, oh, there's a $4,000 keyboard. Never mind.
Mm.
It's like, well, no, that's the answer to your your, there is no VST that can do this question. But
Yeah,
oh
well, I
well.
don't think anybody actually wanted the answer. That's the thing. They were. I think we were so comfortable in our computers that
Hmm.
it needed something else. It needed something different to bring us out, which is one of those things was nostalgia as opposed to looking forward, and the other one
Yeah.
was just hands-on stuff. Hands-on
Hmm.
stuff is always going to be good, and I don't think the workstations really provide that. They provide a I don't know. I guess they provide a DAW workflow that doesn't have all of the advantages that a computer has in the visual presentation of that data. So
Yeah.
it can work. It can work for a lot of people, but it's a difficult jump, I think. There is one thing while I'm thinking about it that I wanted to ask you about, which is that, believe it or not, folks, you ready for this? That you are a user of FL Studio.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear a little bit about your life choices that led to. No, I don't mean that. I mean, how did you come to make the decision to use that door? Were you always a PC user?
Yeah. I started the first music. Like, so I would say up until like 2004. I was programming. Well, no, I'd say 2000. I think in like album terms, but I forget that albums come out a year after you've like made the music. I would say up until like 2002 or 2003, I was all of my albums were being sequenced and recorded from JX305 workstation. That was how I was sequencing everything, and
Okay.
everything was that was like my master clock for everything that I was running. And I was kind of scared of computers. Like not scared. I mean, I was into computers very much. I was like learning programming. I was, all sorts of things like that. But uh, I just didn't want to make music on one ever. Again, probably because I was a jazzer, and so I just didn't want to do it. And then one day I just crossed the threshold and bought FL Studio, which at that point was Fruity Loops, and
Mm-hmm.
it was so much more accessible than Pro Tools. It was just fun to use, and I could get crazy really fast because my music was. I don't. For anybody who's listened to my music back in that period in like 2003, 2000, it's completely bananas. It's nuts. It's like 200 BPM. Like everything is crazy, and so um, all of a sudden I was just like, oh my god, I can really go, you know, to the next level with this. And so that album it was an album called Red Extensions of Me, where I just had like a MIDI guitar and a computer and just went crazy. And FL Studio was like at the heart of that. FL Studio and Reactor at the time. Uh,
Mm.
and FL Studio just kept growing, I've always been comfortable with the interface. I think just because I kind of grew up with it, and now the biggest argument for it that I have, I understand that it's very odd and awkward for people coming from uh, Ableton. I think like coming from Ableton,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
awkward. I feel like it's maybe not. I feel like anything's awkward if you're coming from like the Pro Tools Cubase world. I feel like there is no easy transition to like the newer type of DAW. Um, but for anybody who's into modular, you could understand why FL Studio is an amazing DAW, because you can control anything with anything else. You can control the BPM of your entire session from a pitch detector or from a side chain of a kick. Like, you can go completely mental, and it kind of has that, you can dive deep into everything. Like, every single thing has another menu and another menu and another menu. And for somebody who just is sort of, I think I mentioned this before we went live, somebody who has that like Windows 95 brain where, you know, you just want to like edit every single perimeter of every single thing and hone something in. FL Studio is the most powerful in that regard. I did a video where I spent a week learning Ableton and making trying to basically make a track that I was satisfied with using Ableton. And I tried to use as many Ableton instruments as possible, but I think I did use some plugins. Maybe I did. I don't remember. Anyway, I think I used a reverb plugin. I think the Ableton reverb made me very sad. So, but I noticed right away that Ableton's strength is in the user interface. Like, I noticed right away after that week, I was like, oh, FL Studio's user interface is pretty uninviting for most people. That's the first time I really realized that, because I use Bitwig and Cubase and other stuff, but I think Ableton's strength is that the user interface is just very friendly. Kind of reminds me of like getting to learn Resolve, actually, since I know you're using Resolve now. Like, it kind of reminds me of like, you just have to learn the Ableton workflow, and once you learn that workflow, then you're set and you can build off of that. But whereas FL Studio, you're just kind of left with a bunch of tools. Like, I don't know, whoa, that was crazy, let's go here.
I know. How do you even start? I mean, you seem to be presented first of all with a blank page, you know, with an infinite nothingness, and then a tiny little step sequencer, which said, so what am I doing with this? When do I, you know, where's the record button? It's strange. I mean, I did a review of FL Studio a couple of years ago. Can't remember exactly which version, but it was fascinating. And I have this sense that I only really scratched the surface. You know, I talked about all of the things that people understand about a normal DAW, you know, and I had I had a debate with the man whose name I forget, an Image Line about with Scott, that's right, about the mixer. Scott. This was the time when, because I insisted that the colouring in the mixer would be really, really helpful, because I was lost in the mixer, and so they kind of stuck that in the next version, and then no one was very sure whether they liked it or not. And I'm going, I think that's my fault. I'm sorry. I thought it would be really helpful. I'm not sure that it is.
Such an amazing thing about Image Line too, though, is there have been so many things that I have relayed back to them. Some things are even just crazy features that nobody but me would ever want. And then it's showed up in the next version. Like, that, there's never been a software company that's like more in tune with their own audience than Image Line is. Like, truly, their software develops in how everybody wants it to develop.
Yes.
The one place where FL Studio like shines more than any is the piano roll. And I think that's ultimately why I can't quit. You know, that's why I can't move away from it. Not that I need to or want to, but I feel like the thing that anytime I use another piano roll, I'm just suffering. Because I typically, a lot of people are going to find this crazy, but when I write one of my songs, it's one pattern, one long pattern. I don't use loops. I don't have multiple patterns and loop multiple patterns the way you would in Ableton or something like that. It's just one long pattern, because that encourages me to always change things and keep things challenging, right? And again, it kind of goes back to just like how I learned music. And so it's funny, because FL Studio, while it seems like the most technically, like the weirdest user interface and like out of the mainstream DAWs, and the most, you know, the one that might have the most technical issues, I would say that it's probably not issues, sorry, technical learning curve. I would say that it's probably the best DAW for anybody who is just interested in writing piano music or something like that, or just interested in writing nothing but melody, because the piano roll is just phenomenal in it.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, you get the impression that it has a heavy dance music element. It has heavy industrial music sort of things going on. There's lots of angry guys who are sitting there doing their YouTube version of it with a tiny little thumbnail of themselves in the corner being angry as they're making their music. And it has that vibe. But I mean, I found it to be incredibly capable, and as you say, ImageLine themselves are very, very responsive to their community, which is great. I think it's sadly overlooked. Very often I was just, you're like the first person that I've spoken to in a long time who's an FL Studio user, and that's fascinating to me. And I think top job.
I think it's funny because for a long time I viewed it as a secret weapon, because like I won a Cons award on music for an advertisement that I wrote in FL Studio. I wrote for probably 300, 400 ads in FL Studio over my long time, over a long period. Like things that you see on television, trailers, films, video games, TV shows. And people hear FL Studio and they're just like, nah, all you could really make is like trance music, or all you could really make is dubstep, or whatever electronic music is popular in that statement. And it's like, no, like I have a license for Nuendo, I have a license for Cubase, and FL Studio was the one that was the most capable to hit all of to basically have that amount of control with parameters and with like with the timing, with changing the BPM within the session and stuff like that. It had enough control for me to be able to hit all of the cues properly, and change BPM when I need change BPM, and change the melody around. And yeah, I mean it's a phenomenal. It's funny thing is when I would run into the issues was when I was using Contact in FL Studio, because the plugin wouldn't necessarily support those types of dynamic changes or that kind of versatility. But yeah,
would you say it has would you say it has like a programmer's mentality? Is that where its strength lies?
I don't know. When I think of that, I think of like a tracker. Like I think that the tracker is a program. Maybe, yeah. I think it just, the thing about FL Studio is just the way the mixer is routed in with, like, it seems like there's almost an unnecessary step, right? Because you have like your step sequencer interface, and then you have your mixer, and then like it seems almost like you could just take that step sequencer interface away and go right to the mixer, and then open a piano roll in the mixer. And maybe that is in the future versions, because in terms of what we think of when we think of FL Studio, when we think of just that step sequencer, like old school Roland thing, I haven't used that in 20 years. I haven't like so much pressed one of those, unless it's by accident. I'm like, oops, I just right click, open roll, and go that way.
But it's still there, like, as the basis of every track, though, isn't it? Your track list, exists within that little interface.
Yeah, and so it's kind of funny in that regard, because now that you mention it, that is the first thing that everybody sees. Are you familiar with Mr. Bill? Are you familiar? He's an artist, but he has a YouTube channel, but he doesn't update it as much as like we do. But he has a very popular Ableton course that I think is on its like 3rd revision or something. And he's like, one of the primary, I don't know, one of the top Ableton users in terms of like power users of the company. And when I made my Ableton video, he actually, we like talked to people from Ableton, and then I introduced him to like Scott from FL Studio, and was like, all right, well, let's, why don't you do something in FL Studio and I'll do it in Ableton? And, and we'll see what we come up with at the end of the week. And like 3 days in, he was just like, I just feel like I can't give this a fair shot within the scope of a week. Like, he's like, I feel like there's too many rabbit holes. It's too complicated. Like, yeah, not saying that he couldn't figure it out if he didn't have the time, but I think that's probably a good difference, because he's a musician that is very technical, who like extremely technical, and somebody who I respect a lot, and his music's amazing. And so that's probably a good example of like, yeah, FL Studio has a higher learning curve, but it ultimately is more powerful as a result of that. But those powers are needed by everybody.
Yeah, fair enough. And do you know whether
your chat is really angry right now?
And do you know? Can you answer the question as to whether the sample that they use at the front of all of their videos, is it from Way of the Exploding Fist from the Commodore 64?
No, I don't know. It doesn't sound familiar. Yeah,
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a throwback. Anyway, look, we've hit a couple of hours, mate, which is quite extraordinary. So we must have we must have tired people out, I think, by now. But we've covered some ground, unexpected ground, and some expected ground, which has been great. It's been totally super. I should throw in actually in the chat, if you have a burning question which hasn't been answered because we've ignored you mostly up until now, then do throw it in there. And as we sort of bring this to a damp squib of a finish, we'll see if we can entertain that for you. But failing that, I'd just like to thank you, Ben, for coming on this evening. It's been great getting to know you a little bit, finding out a bit more how you tick, what you do, and talking about stuff. And
thanks for having me. I'm sorry I didn't know more about the NAMM the NAMM announcement.
There was nothing. There was nothing really to know, I don't think.
Yeah, Initially, when we talked about this like a month ago, I was like, oh yeah, I'll probably have a bunch of opinions about all the stuff that came out for NAMM or it was announced, but it's like, nope.
No, I mean there was an Uno Synth 2, Synth Pro from IK Multimedia. They've now given out a bit more information about that. What I saw today is that it's based on an SSI, I think SSL. Oh, I can't remember. Just going to embarrass myself now. A Dave Rosin semiconductor is in there somewhere. So they've rolled out, because all we had really was kind of a 90s trance dance music demo, which didn't really tell you anything much at all. And so they've now rolled out. Yeah, they've now rolled out a bit more information about it, which is good. So that might be more than we think.
Yeah.
No, that really is what I think of. I mean, there was a little bit of modular. I mean, Alex Four was there, who's a distributor, I think, of a lot of modular people in the States. And they had a few things, but I don't think much of it was new. A lot of it was stuff we've seen before that's dripped out over the year, but they had quite a few presentations on that. MIDI 2.0 somebody asked about. Do you have an impression of what that is? I don't know what that is. I think we all know what that is, but does it have a point?
I feel like it's so broad right now. And I feel like the way that MPE has rolled out so slowly, I almost don't get excited. It's I personally, if I had my way, like everything would be an Ethernet cable, because I could run like all of the cables that run across this room, which are just it's a cable nest all around everywhere. All of that could be one Ethernet cable, just going one there. And when you use fiber and stuff like that, when you see how much data can be put through fiber, it's just amazing. So, I mean, until we get there, we're always just sort of held back by. You know what? I will say one thing: those MIDI interfaces that have the 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter to in, like, we need to. I hope that Joe Biden just makes an executive order to like make sure that all of those are compatible.
I would celebrate that. Yeah, because it's like
worldwide.
Because like the first time you use it, you go, so I can plug this mini jack in here and this mini jack in there, and it works. Well, that's bloody awesome. I can do that in this. No, I can't do it in that. Why can't I do it in that one? No, I can't do it in that one. Can I do that one and that one? No. Well, which one? I need this adapter.
Can I put a 5mm cable into that without doing the DIN plug at all? That'd be amazing. Nope, can't do that.
No.
Why is this going on?
I don't know. It feels like such a missed opportunity. It's like, this is a thing of... No, it's not a thing of beauty. It's just a pain in the ass. And now, I don't trust MIDI cables anymore. For some reason, it's like getting USB round the right way the first time. I can't do it with a MIDI cable anymore. because I've got MIDI adapters on either end going into mini jack, plug it all in. Which bit isn't working? I don't know. Try another cable. Try another adapter. Try another synth. It drives me
I have
nuts.
so many of those adapters. Maybe somebody should make a box where you could just like select different configurations, just like a tiny little. Yeah, I bet you could do that because MIDI has a slight bit of power in it. I bet you could power the box.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen switches, Type A, Type E switches on some Eurorack modules. That's been around. There's probably going to be one baked into a cable at some point, I should think.
Yeah.
But we missed that opportunity, I think. But I mean, MIDI 2.0, I think essentially looks like what we all think MIDI is anyway. We all think it does these wonderful things, and it's not until you get frustrated with it you realize actually MIDI's pretty stupid. But because it's plugged in and working, I don't really have to think about it. Or because it's all virtual on my computer, it just acts like it's extraordinary, and so I'm not really worried about it too much.
In one of my past videos ages ago, I think it was just like one of my first modular videos, I calculated the size of how many CV cables, or how many 3.5 millimeter cables you would need to make a MIDI cable, like to make one, because I was just curious about it. And so I actually did like a simulation to figure out the mass that you would need, and it was huge. It was like half this room full of cables bundled together in one long tube to create one MIDI. Obviously, MIDI is limited to its bit rate, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how efficient MIDI actually is, considering how old it is. And the answer is so efficient that it's almost unimaginable. And so, it's like, whoa. Yeah.
Okay, so any questions? Has Ben any plans to tour in the UK post we lock you up? If you turn up, we lock you up these days. So any other plans?
Yeah. For 2020, I did, but obviously it didn't work out. I mean, I want to say yeah, but at the same time, I see the performing live possibility getting pushed further and further. Like my booking agency dropped me, not because like I don't hold anything against them. They dropped me because they had to keep on only the few artists that earn them the most money. I would say half of venues are probably shuttered, maybe only a third. But even then, there's already like 5 or 6 holds per night for venues, which means that there's just going to be more competition when this opens back up, and shows are going to pay less as a result of that, because people are going to be taking lower guarantees, meaning that it's going to be harder for my ridiculous setup to make sense economically, to be shipped to another continent, or even in the same continent. Like, there's, even if I moved to England or something like that, it might not be as economic as it would be to just make some YouTube content and write some songs, which is what I was already struggling with pre-pandemic. So we'll see. I don't want to like wrestle with the fact that I might not be performing anymore in my life.
Yeah.
Because all I've performed since I was a teenager, like constantly my whole life. And so it's hard to say goodbye, but that is a reality. That is part of the COVID reality. So.
Okay. Is the Empress still your favorite reverb pedal, or are there any other reverbs you would recommend?
The Empress reverb is still my favorite. Yeah. That's, if the Specular Tempest would be the second highest. The Empress is on top. Specular Tempest is number 2. Number 3, I say, would be the. I haven't tried the Chase, that new. What's that expensive one? The one that has the. You know what I'm talking about? It's the pedal with the. Has the motorized faders on.
Pedal with motorized faders. Good lord.
Yeah, and it costs like nearly $1,000.
See, these are dangerous things to put by your feet, I always think.
Yeah, I don't really. That's why I haven't really. They haven't sent me one, and I'm not going to spend that much on it to do a review. Because I do think that Empress is hard to beat, just because their algorithm, I can't figure out what's going on. I can't hear the comb filters or anything. And like reverb is like, I'm such a reverb snob, and so I feel like if a pedal, if I can't tell what's going on in the algorithm in a pedal, then like how are you really gonna beat it? And if you do beat it, like does it even matter? So
cool. Well, I think we can bring it to a close at that point. Thank you ever so much for watching, for you lot out there in Teleland, and your contribution in the chat. I appreciate that. I will, because after I finish a live stream, I like to look back through the whole thing and enjoy the chat as if I'm watching as somebody else. No, I don't really do that, but I'd like the idea that I might do that, and that I might really appreciate something that somebody said at some point in that time. That would be great. So just imagine that I do that, and then I think we all win.
Yeah.
So later this week, just to let you know, tomorrow I'm talking to Travasi. I hope I'm saying that right. Who is a modular musician and producer and a very cool person who is honouring me with her presence tomorrow. That's going to be great. Looking forward to that a great deal. And then on Thursday night, I have Steve Davis. Yes, the man from the snooker. I have Steve Davis here on Thursday, who, apart from being a several times world champion snooker player, is a extraordinary modular and electronic musician. He has a new album coming out and a book about his journey into electronic music coming out at some point this year. So he's doing me the honour of coming on, and we're going to talk about that, which is very exciting. I can't quite explain how excited I am about that.
Well, what time will that stream be? Just so I
same
don't want
time.
to do a stream.
Yeah, no, same time again, 7 o'clock all this week, or 2 o'clock if you're in wherever it is you are, I think. Did I get that right? I have no clue where Georgia is in the world of America, but
New York, it's like on the same strip of Earth. New York,
okay, so. Great. See, I just see, as I say, I see it as swampland. So swampland's sort of always in the middle for me. You know, Texas, swampland.
Yeah.
A bit towards Florida, I guess.
Yeah, well, Florida, the South Georgia. I think the reason so many things film in Georgia is because it's such a diverse landscape. Like you have rocky parts, you have like mountains, you have swamps, and so I live kind of at the foothills of the mountains, but it's still very hot. Yeah.
Nice. So what was I talking about? I have no clue. So that's later in the week. So yes, we'll 7 o'clock tomorrow night and Thursday night, and I might well do a live stream. All by myself at the weekend. Not sure yet. Not sure if I'm going to be able to fit it in. But so that'll be us for tonight. Thank you again, Ben, for coming along and entertaining us this evening with a little bit of chat about a load of old nonsense. And I think that'll do us. I'll go and press the big red button, and we'll see you another time. Thanks, everybody.